Okay, guys, I've been doing some research here, and I want to share you something here. First of all, this guy has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I have not. I want to give you my version of growing up and tell you how it's different than this person here. So, growing up, I've always had trouble communicating. Always had trouble understanding language. It was isolated because of the communication problem. It was a social skill issue. Communicating with people may cause anxiety with me. It caused behavior issues. Add the painful to sound certain lights, smells, and textures to the mix. The sudden temperature change or pressure change. Then add a few other elements to school bullying and wanting to go to school, wanting to overperform, wanting to learn everything I can, wanting to do very well in school, and then suddenly it stops. I'm going to get to that in a minute. So, I went to school initially at, we'll just use the current name of that school, Summit. It was originally went by a school name of Language Development Program. I was not in the early intervention program. I was in their preschool and kindergarten classroom setting. I was there for about 3 years. I went to first grade where my behaviors, I only remember bits and pieces at this point. I remember very little at language development program. How my behavior started improving, how things were getting easier to communicate. Then went to Fletcher Elementary School, public school, special ed class, where my behaviors drastically changed for the worse. I think it was a less structured classroom. It's made more peers, and just too much going on around me. Just not enough one-on-one attention. Then went to a school at second grade. Didn't finish first grade, by the way. Went to second grade. St. Bosie's was a school program I went to, where I had issues with behavior regression again. Then I went to another school, Stanley G. Falk School, at the Roswell site. I was in their 12 students, 2 teachers, 1 aide program, which is similar to what, I don't know exactly what classification classrooms that was, but that was the classroom setting I was in. I had some behavior issues, but I feel my behaviors got worse when I was getting closer to going to be admitted at Connors. I remembered a big, drastic behavior decline after improving somewhat in my behaviors there. They had, in this setting here, if I remember right, I had a lot of OT, a lot of speech, I don't think there was group speech done at this point. Then, when I was around 9, when I was 7, I went to 7.5, I was admitted at Connors Children's Center for my living environment. School was still at the Cambridge site at Roswell, the Falk School. At around 9, I went to the Falk School at Delaware, which was on campus with Connors, and my behaviors de-escalated again after improving somewhat. Then I ended up having group speech, and I didn't have OT so much, but I didn't have the equipment, I remember, in the OT room that was specialized for what was being done with me at the other school. They had group speech where they started recording me and my facial expressions and my peers' facial expressions and things. I think I may have been like the only autistic kid in the school at this point, by the way. Or may not have. I don't know. I actually almost guarantee I was like one of the only few oddballs here. Then my classroom for the last year and a half, I was put in a 611 class, which was every class in that school. But Mrs. Patterson was my teacher. She became like one of my favorite teachers because I was underperforming in almost every area of my academics. She had spent one-on-one with me. Went from reading like Dr. Seuss type books to reading like a book called Shallow, a book called Holes, and a few others. It was just in 1 year. Went from that, less than 1 year, went to reading books like that. Went from 1 year of reading of a huge increase in math abilities. All this stuff started really working with me. And this teacher spent one-on-one time with me in math, in history, and science. Mostly math was what all math classes of mine were one-on-one, where the rest of the class was taught by the teacher aide. The reading I had learned with this teacher and one other student. And his reading was a little bit better than mine, if I remember right. But I think I had the hugest improvement in my reading. All other classes, like, for example, for history and science, it was not so much me one-on-one with this teacher. But this teacher went off the books for what was being taught in those classes with me separately, but as an add-on to the regular classroom settings. She had done an academic assessment earlier that year. She was so curious, she ended up getting approval to do a second assessment towards the end of the year, and saw a huge spike in my grades. It was like, okay, going from first grade to 10th grade overnight, pretty much, if you want to ask me. Maybe a little dramatic there for my example, but then things got a little bit tough for me. Because I left that school overachieving my academic potential. I wasn't really communicating well either, but my behaviors were much improved in school. To go back to, and my behaviors in Connors wasn't really improved. I'm going to tell you in a few minutes what happened there. Actually, maybe I'll tell you now, and then I'll go back to the transfer. So while at Connors, I was the type of person that was always the oddball. Didn't really have anyone there to pay attention to me or be friends with me. Didn't have anyone playing with me, so I would always play on the swing sets. Or play on the jungle, or a playground jungle gym type thingy, without having any interest with others. I did play hockey or football every so often with my other peers, but I tended to stay to myself. I remember having a lot of conflicts with following the leader with my classmates in Connors, whether they were silliness or odd, inappropriate behaviors. There's one kid, his name was Chris Sager, had done a finger dance and thought I was extremely funny, so he had started that finger dance, and it was after watching Mrs. Doubtfire, and I started becoming interested in watching him do the finger dance with the index finger going up and down. I think it was the motion, and then I started doing it, and then it just couldn't stop doing it because it just was fun. I think it's because of repetitive motion, I don't know. Then after all that, I was basically just limited what I was doing and saying. Things went, a little bit poor behaviors after that. And then I went to the second hall where it was a little bit older children, and I had a lot of issues for the long time in that one, because I think they were just, those people were older than me by like maybe a hair, but then I became the oldest person, and then things improved there because my behaviors improved because I was older than the rest of the people there. I then got discharged back to my parents' house, went from the Delaware school to the Cambridge site, and then things got pretty rough from there. I had issues with going from 10th grade math, geometry, to 1+1 math. I had a lot of behavior issues. A lot of the students were all, like, I don't know, street smart kids. They didn't have any willpower to learn math or reading. I was still at their reading age level, so it wasn't so bad for that, but I was bored in the science, was bored, somewhat bored in the history, but they had taught me history things that weren't really taught in any other classes up to this point. The Constitution and things like that. Then the math was a big issue with my behaviors because I was just like so bored. It was like I was catching errors in my math assignments, and the teacher argued with me, "You got this wrong." I said, "No, calculate it again." I didn't say it that way. I said, "No, calculate." I said, I actually ended up showing her in front of her how to calculate it, and she said, "Wow, let me use a calculator." Then she started catching on that her teacher book for grading the material had a lot of mathematical errors for 1+1, 2+2, 20+2, that kind of stuff. And then she realized I was way smarter than what she was. And she kept on telling me in front of, my mom rather, in front of me, I'm just a preschool teacher's aide. I'm not qualified to teach your kid. Your kid can barely talk or communicate, very limited language and social interaction skills, and he has more intelligence than I have. I don't know how to teach your child or interact with your child. He's smarter than me, but has way less language than my other class students. How can I teach this person? Well, I don't know either. I was put in the wrong class. So that was a 1 year done type deal for that teacher. I ended up having really bad issues, but then fast forward to this point, I was already in a bad situation going to school because of the bus. Ken Patton, Brian, or I think his name was Dan O'Brien. Yeah, Dan O'Brien. And then there was another Dan. And then there was a few other people that were on that bus that were abusive people to the bus aide and bus driver. That would bring, Ken Patton brought a gun. They brought cigarettes, marijuana. They brought razor blades. They did drugs shooting up their veins. It was chaos. Only one of my classmates were on that bus, and the bus was full. And the one, it was a short bus, and usually there's like I don't know, like maybe 5 rows of seats. One of the seats had to be teamed up because of some of the the bus size that were on that bus. It was very loud, very chaotic, very smelly with the cigarette smoke and things, and the behaviors were really not used appropriately in the language. I don't like. Well, then it was very obvious when I had not wanting to go to school was because of the bus. Couldn't communicate that with anyone then. I had issues, and then when they gave me a private bus, things were much more quieter. I was going to school. Then they had put me back on the bus that was causing me issues. and then behaviors, and it declined. And not only that, I had trouble with some of my classmates. I was in this classroom after the first year of school of the Miss Ballbauer and Miss Jason Speth. I had ended up going to another classroom teacher in the same classroom, different classmates, two different teachers, Miss Flake and Miss Klansky. Probably one of my two favorite teachers, by the way. I think they really understood me. I think they really had tried their best with me, and I really felt they may have been afraid of me from how my behaviors were from the past class. I really felt I did best, and I think these two teachers were more qualified to help me than the other teachers I've had even after this class. Then I spent maybe I think 1.5 years. I remember this one kid. His name was Joe. I remember his name because my brother's name. He was only in there short period of time. He was taken to Summit. This class I think there was more than just me with autism. I think almost everybody in this class had autism. When Joe had a behavior issue, I had a behavior issue. When I had a behavior issue, Joe had a behavior issue. And it basically was a chain reaction of classmates. Then was put in the classroom with another teacher. I forgot her name. She was very well. I want to say I responded well with her. Then she was replaced partly through the year where she ended up going to another school. I think she was older too, so she may have retired. Mr. Velazquez became my teacher then. I had a little conflict with him. He wasn't really understanding me. I didn't understand him. But I had a teacher aide who ended up becoming my German 1 teacher, Mr. Schottauer. He just was new to the school before the transition. And I responded with him in my class. I don't know why. I always felt comfortable with him. Then Mr. Velazquez became my teacher. Then there was a little issues with that. And I had also issues at home and on the bus, I think. Then the following year had a full year with Mr. Velazquez. I think I had started increasing my performance again towards the end of the year. Started really adjusting to the teaching style. I don't think Mr. Schottauer was not the teacher aide then. It was another teacher aide. Then I went to a classroom where I really missed a teacher a lot. His name was Mr. Fox. He was one of the best teachers I had. He taught to me over my performance issues, over my academic level, and I responded quite well. However, I was missing school a lot because I was afraid of the people on the bus. But that second year, I had increase in my grades and attendance because those kids were all gone from that point on. The following year was my first year modified high school program, where I had extreme difficulty in the transition of going from class to class. That first year, I also had improvement in my behaviors after about the first 2 months or so. The second year was my biggest improvement in both behaviors and academics, and hands down any year ever. The last year before I ended up making a poor decision, but it wasn't all my fault. I dropped out because I was working all closing shifts at McDonald's. It was always on the school nights that I had to close. By the time I got done with school, okay, we'll do from wake up. I woke up around maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock to get my bus at 6:30, or before 7 rather. Got on the bus, got to school, had issues with being awake, alert. Then I ended up having issues getting out of school. School was very good. I really liked it. I really struggled staying awake and paying attention because I was so tired. Then I ended up having about maybe not even a half hour of rest time at home after getting home from school. End up having to go to work from 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, maybe 7 o'clock. I think it was closer to 7, but I had done my homework, barely could do my homework. Basically did my homework on the way home from school and then on the way to school. So then I got to work from like 7 to like 3 in the morning. Clock out time was always 1, but we always had to work until like 2 or 3. So ended up getting home around 3, taking a shower, getting ready for bed, to get my diaper on, going to sleep. Sad thing is, I still peed the bed, even with the very limited sleep. That is weird. I didn't even drink. At this point here, I was also having a little bit more access in school because Miss Rebet Hagen had made sure I had a 2-liter bottle Mountain Dew. I had trouble asking my teacher to help me with what to do for being able to complete my school and get better grades and then focus on work after that. Could not communicate that need. I couldn't do it. Didn't know how to do it then. Didn't have the word language even as, let alone I was a little timid. And I was also like afraid of losing my job and then having a big huge change. But I rather work and go to school because that's what I seen other people do around my age. But fast forward a little bit further here, I ended up having a little bit more issues with attendance because I was just too tired. I couldn't function. I made a poor decision. I probably should have quit McDonald's and finished school. The school and work was just way too much for me at this point. I made a bad decision, and nobody really had any way of helping me with this either. At the time, my case manager was not ever willing to help me with this, and she had tried helping me get in group homes. However, the group homes always just deny me, even with my diagnosis of bipolar at this point, because my needs were too much, and I needed to go through another type of agencies, and those agencies, no doctor was able to diagnose me with autism until just recent. So I want to play you this video here, and there was a lot of social skill problems in my life, communication, following the leader, doing things that were like, that could be very easily mistaken as withdrawal, odd behaviors and things like that. Let's put it this way. I may have had only like 1 or 2 friends. One of my friends from my childhood has stayed in my life because he accepted me. And it's a pleasure having somebody who just accepts me and understands me, rather than just be not there for me because they don't know what's happening around me. The sad thing is, I had interest in wanting to be everyone's friend. However, I just couldn't become friends with everyone. Friends confused me. People confused me. Their language, their behaviors. But I have interest. I have a very strong interest being your friend. I need you to come to me though. And I'm going to try to do better at becoming more friendships because I love people. I love people as if they were my pet. My dog, my cat, my fish. I love animals. I love people. I just don't know how to go about it. If that hurt ears. But let's finish this video here.
So in high school, I was, kind of popular. I played football. I had a lot of friends, I was gregarious and outgoing. And I was just a likable guy. Everybody seemed to like me. The first inklings I had...
By the way, everybody liked me too, teachers, because I was one of the smartest kids they ever taught. I don't understand why. But I also had cute curly hair and I hated haircuts. I was not popular like this guy here, like he described. Even though I had people who liked me.
Probably were when I would have some kind of thought and I would say it out loud to my friends and they'd be like, what are you talking about? Or something that sort of half connected to the thing that was going on. And I would express this thought and people were like, that's crazy, Mike. So I think the breaking point was in college when I started to get really paranoid and I was having trouble even leaving the house because I was afraid of what people outside were thinking about me, and I was afraid that they were gonna cause me harm somehow. So I'd go to the grocery store and I'd be freaking out.
This is not me at all. I'm not paranoid, never was.
I'd have to get back home, so I knew something was wrong, but I thought that I could fix it somehow. I shared it with my parents, but I was also smoking a lot of pot during that time, so they figured it was just the drugs. It was causing the paranoia. I think the two kind of coincided and created sort of a perfect storm, you know? I think I was a little loopy beforehand, but the pot just exacerbated things. So I knew that when I started...
By the way, I don't do pot because I am not a rule breaker. I don't like breaking rules. And that's why I don't like doing things that are bad and not good to do, because it's not legal. It's against the law to do certain things. I don't like breaking rules or being upset. So that's why I like following rules.
Making connections about things that didn't seem to exist. Like when I would imagine that something was put in the world for me to see at that specific moment. When I started making connections like that, I knew that there was something wrong, and I asked my parents if I could see somebody, but again, they thought it was just the pot. They had no concept of mental illness before my trip and before everything went down.
See, I had counseling then. I had counseling. So it wasn't like at all I wasn't in treatment.